Have you ever felt like you're standing on the edge of a breakthrough, but right before it happens, everything falls apart? You pray, you wait, and the silence just gets louder. What if I told you that the darkest, most confusing moment of your life is actually the clearest sign that God is about to move? Let's talk about what happens right before God answers. I remember when I was waiting for a major door to open in my life a few years ago. I'd been praying for months, doing everything right, trusting God with all my heart. But instead of getting better, my situation suddenly took a nosedive. The opportunity I thought was mine fell through, my finances were stretched to the breaking point, and I honestly felt like God had forgotten my address. I sat on my living room floor, staring at the wall, thinking, why is this happening now? I was so close. Have you ever been there? You're holding on to faith, but your reality is screaming that it's over. What I didn't realize then, and what changed how I see everything, is that the intense pressure I felt wasn't a sign of God's absence. It was the birth pangs of my breakthrough. It was the midnight before the morning. Sometimes the enemy fights you the hardest when he knows God is about to hand you the victory. The darkest part of the night is always right before the sun comes up. That brings us to the first thing that happens right before God answers: the weeping peaks. We see this so beautifully in Psalm chapter 30, verse 5, which says, "Weeping may stay for the night, but rejoicing comes in the morning." Notice how David doesn't say that the night is quiet. He says weeping stays for the night. Right before God steps in, your emotional exhaustion usually hits its absolute peak. You might feel a heavy sorrow, a deep frustration, or a sudden urge to just give up on the promise completely. Think about a marathon runner. They call it hitting the wall. Around mile 20, their body is screaming at them to stop. Every muscle aches, and their mind tells them they can't take another step. But if they can just push through that agonizing wall, they get a second wind that carries them to the finish line. Your spiritual life works the exact same way. When your weeping feels the heaviest, when the tears just won't stop falling, and the anxiety is trying to suffocate your faith, you're hitting the wall. But that wall isn't your stopping point. It's the boundary line between your waiting season and your answered prayer. God sees those tears, and He's preparing the morning light. Don't quit when the night feels the coldest. You see, the enemy wants you to look at your circumstances and conclude that God is angry with you. He wants you to believe that the silence means rejection. But silence is often the sound of God working behind the scenes, preparing the exact conditions needed for your miracle. Your tears are watering the seeds of your coming joy. The second thing that happens right before God answers is that your false foundations get shaken. Listen to what David says in Psalm chapter 30, verses 6 and 7. He writes, "When I felt secure, I said, I'll never be shaken. Lord, when you favored me, you made my royal mountain stand firm. But when you hid your face, I was dismayed." In the ancient world, kings built their fortresses on high mountains to feel untouchable. David thought his security came from his own mountain, his own strength, his own perfect setup. But God had to shake that mountain so David would remember who actually provides the safety. Right before God answers your prayer, He'll often allow the things you are secretly leaning on to be removed. Maybe it's a backup plan you had in your back pocket. Maybe it's a relationship you thought would save you, or a financial cushion you were trusting more than you were trusting. God. When everything gets shaken, it feels terrifying. Like God is hiding his face. But he isn't abandoning you. He's simply clearing the stage. He's removing the flimsy props so that when the answer comes, you'll know without a shadow of a doubt that it was nobody but God who did it. He wants to be your only foundation. It's painful when our backup plans fall apart. We panic. We wonder how we're going to survive. But God knows that if he answers your prayer while you're still leaning on your own understanding, you might give the credit to your own cleverness. He loves you too much to let you settle for a false sense of security. The shaking is actually a profound act of his mercy. The third and most powerful thing that happens right before God answers is the sudden shift. This is where the emotional intensity builds, because God rarely moves slowly when the appointed time finally arrives. In Psalm chapter 30, verse 11, David cries out, "You turned my wailing into dancing. You removed my sackcloth and clothed me with joy." Notice the contrast here. Wailing to dancing. Sackcloth to joy. These aren't gradual changes. You don't slowly transition from wearing funeral clothes to dancing in a celebration. It's a sudden, radical transformation. Right before God answers, you might feel completely trapped in your sackcloth. The grief, the waiting, the heavy burden feels like it's permanently stitched to your skin. You can't see a way out, and you start to believe this is just how your life will always be. But God is a God of the sudden turnaround. Think about Joseph in the prison. One day, he's a forgotten inmate, and literally the next day, he's the second most powerful man in Egypt. God can change your entire reality in 24 hours. The intense pressure you're feeling right now is the tension of the slingshot being pulled back. The further back you're pulled into the dark, the farther and faster God is going to launch you into his purpose. Your dancing is